and welcome to this week's Movie Math, where it was a pretty traditional Thanksgiving feast for Hollywood this year. Disney dominated, Warner Brothers came in a strong second, which has pretty much been the narrative for this entire year. You have no idea. Wait until we get into those numbers. But I would say that where things get really interesting for the Thanksgiving frame, which is industry speak for the weekend, they call it a frame, is in both the big picture and the tiniest details, which of course we will be discussing. And I want to kick off with that big picture look. Because basically on Sunday, Disney was bragging about how they own Thanksgiving. They were like, yeah, nothing beats a Disney movie on the Thanksgiving weekend because your whole family's together, and what will you all enjoy more than a Disney movie? And in their defense, boy, did they dominate Thanksgiving. Wait until you see the stats. But what I was looking up here specifically was, do they have Thanksgiving booked in the near future? I was like, well, I hope you've reserved it, and sure enough, they have. They have Coco from Pixar coming out next Thanksgiving, and then after that, Gigantic from Disney Animation. But while I was looking at November 2017, I found some amazing evidence for the predictability of Hollywood, and that, Hollywood isn't big on risk-taking. So they like to see what's worked in the past and then repeat. Now, sometimes they're pleasantly surprised or very pleasantly surprised, and sometimes they're disappointed or very disappointed. But by looking to the past and trying to repeat it as best they can, they have a kind of a general idea of where they're going to end up, which interestingly enough is what happened this year for Thanksgiving. It wasn't anything amazing, but it wasn't horrible. It was like right in the sweet spot of what they were expecting, basically. And I think they can expect pretty much the same result for Thanksgiving next year, for the whole month of November. Now, some of you might be like, why do you think we're so predictable, Grace? But hey, audiences are predictable, numbers don't lie. I've talked to you before about how Ryan Gosling always opens with about 11 million with a mainstream movie, that, when it opens wide, and there are other such things. For the most part, audiences are really predictable, which is why Hollywood sticks with formula filmmaking, because it gets results. But anyway, let's take a look at November 2017. Once again, Marvel will kick off the month. This year they had Doctor Strange. Next year, Thor Ragnarok. Then, just 2 weeks later, just as Warner Brothers debuted Fantastic Beasts, they will debut Justice League. So there comes Warner Brothers in right on schedule. It's amazing! And then for Thanksgiving, what do you know? Not only do you have Disney coming in with an animated movie, this time again, Pixar's Coco, but you also have an Allied style repeat. That's amazing. Who would want to try and get Allied's results from this weekend? But, I think Allied's being judged unfairly. But anyway, you've got Murder on the Orient Express for Fox. So they're going to try an adult thriller to counter-program, I guess, that Disney animation piece. Maybe if Allied had seemed less like a World War II glossy porno, maybe more people would have seen it. So hopefully the Murder on the Express will be more family-oriented. But I just thought it was amazing. It's such a wonderful example of how Hollywood repeats itself. Often with, I was going to say great effect, but sometimes just good enough effect. All right, so let's go back to Disney's domination. So, 9 out of the 10 top Thanksgiving openings of all time are Disney's, which is absolutely stunning. You see a little more variation here, though. Hunger Games has traditionally done quite well over the Thanksgiving frame. Good Times, remember when that was a big franchise? And then also Harry Potter has done well. Fantastic Beasts also had a good weekend. We're going to talk about that. It didn't have like a Harry Potter weekend, but still, it can lay claim to this frame as well. But boy, that Disney domination is just, if I were the other studios, we're going to talk about the other studios. I don't know how they can let that stand. I'd be like, damn it, I'm going to break that up. I'm going to challenge that. You can't have a monopoly on Thanksgiving. I've got content too. But apparently they're not doing that. Only Warner Brothers is willing to try. So, as for Warner Brothers and Disney, when you look at the 2016 domestic box office up until this point, all of Hollywood has made $10 billion. But a quarter of that is Disney's. $2.5 billion is earned by Disney. And again, this is just domestic. We're not talking worldwide. So that's stunning. And then Warner Brothers comes in second place with $1.8 billion for the year so far, domestically, which gives Disney and Warner Brothers 43% of all the money being made domestically this year so far. Paramount came in last, which is why Brad Gray is fighting for his job as the head of Paramount's, Paramount Pictures. And then Sony is second to last, and we all know it's no picnic for the executives over there either. But let's take a look at what's going on here. Why is Disney dominating so much? Well, they have a blockbuster-only strategy, which really seems to be working, and also their investments are paying off. Bob Iger purchased Pixar. He purchased Marvel. He purchased Lucasfilm, and it's just really working for the guy. Warner Brothers is copying that strategy, and as you can see, they're the only one really getting any results. Now, I've written out for each studio their franchises, and you can see that they're not consistently pumping out movies like Warner Brothers and Disney's are. So they need to work on this. All right. So Fox has X-Men, Alien, and Apes, and also when you see this list, it'll help you understand the movies that are coming out. Why are these studios pushing these franchises so hard? This is why. They got to get on the freaking board. All right, so again, Fox has X-Men, Alien, the Alien franchise, and Apes. Sony has James Bond. So far, I don't believe that they've renewed the Bond deal with Sony, but hopefully it'll stay there. And also Spider-Man, which is kind of Marvel's now too, but you can see why Sony is willing to play with Marvel on that one because they just needed to work. Lionsgate had Hunger Games. We'll see if they're able to bring that back in any capacity. Universal, they had that great year, right? Like I think 2015. Not been able to repeat it. Well, it's only been a year, but the Jurassic World movies, you're going to see those really be pushed hard. The Fast and Furious, Bourne, they tried that this year. The Illumination, very strong for them with animation. They're going to be getting DreamWorks, but DreamWorks isn't anywhere near what it needs. It's not operating anywhere near what it needs to be to get movies on this list. And also, they're building their Monsters cinematic universe, which I'm sure they hope will get on here. Now, maybe Paramount is just having a bad year because they have a really nice stable of franchises. They have Star Trek, they have Transformers, which we all know they're working very hard on. That Bumblebee script is a buzzin', as we discussed, with that screenwriter who's shut in has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. But also they have Mission Impossible over there, which everybody's very happy with, including Tom Cruise. He's so happy with his paycheck, he wants other people to match it. But Paramount, so they're in good shape. They're just having a bad year. So I can see why Brad Gray is fighting to survive because there's an argument to be made for keeping him. But I don't know. They shouldn't have off years this off. But anyway, that's the state of Hollywood in the big picture. I hope you found it as interesting as I do. Now let's get into like the mid-range situation here. We'll get into the details later in the episode with the top performers for the Thanksgiving weekend. Doing it a little differently. I'm not going to just go through the new releases first. I want to talk about the performers in order. So number 1, Moana. It was number 2 for the biggest Thanksgiving openings of all time. It just missed the mark with Frozen. Frozen was able to keep its icy crown, but it did edge out Toy Story 2. It had an amazing 3% hold from Black Friday to Saturday. Black Friday is the big shopping day, and also it turns out it's the big movie-going day. This was the day that all the movies did their best. Now, usually there's a little bit of a bigger drop to Saturday, but 3% was notable. It got an A cinema score from audiences, but I'll be curious to see what its second week hold is. Luckily, it has no competition coming up, so it might be able to do quite well. I'll be curious to see with this, like, basically, Office Christmas Party is the weekend after, but with this 2-week like open territory, I'll be curious to see how these films position themselves and who can hold and who drops. But it did open pretty close to Zootopia, about just 6 million more. And Zootopia, but that was, Zootopia did that over 3 days. Moana did this over 5. I don't know how fair that is to penalize Moana for that, though, because, it still did the business, right? And this was the movie-going weekend. But anyway, Zootopia, the reason I bring it up is that Zootopia did get to $1 billion. So did Finding Dory. That opened much bigger, though. But so Moana has opened at a good enough point that it could also get to $1 billion. Another one for Disney. It's an embarrassment of riches. I will say, though, with the Annie Awards, Zootopia did better in terms of nominations. So Moana might not be but I don't know. The Annie Awards are more actually concerned with the quality of the films they're nominating, whereas, as we all know, the Golden Globes and the Oscars are notorious for just, which movie did I hear the most about? What did I hear about most recent? What are my kids singing right now? And while I don't love Moana's songs, others do, and Zootopia ain't got no songs. Well, it has that Shakira one, but I don't think anybody's singing that. So that's Moana, opened in very good shape. The Disney factory is alive and well. Then Fantastic Beasts came in second place, and it had like it had a pretty good headline. It was the biggest opening ever for a Harry Potter movie in China, and with 41.1 million. And there it was able to best Moana considerably, pulling in where Moana pulled in 12.1, which is interesting because we all know that China, little bit not cool with people of color in movies for some reason. I don't understand it. They have a weird relationship with Caucasians over there. They draw them in their anime. They only want to see them in movies, but yet they are not Caucasians. But anyway, Moana so couldn't compete with the very white Fantastic Beasts. And then here domestically, Fantastic Beasts had a very strong 39% hold. That's excellent. It is the second best hold ever for the Harry Potter franchise. It cheated a little bit by opening lower than everybody else, but the best hold still is the first Harry Potter movie with 36% for its second weekend. That opened at 90 versus Fantastic Beasts 74. But worldwide, Fantastic Beasts is already up to 474 million and had only 180 million budget, so it's already past breaking even in terms of what they spent on the film. And then when you factor in the ad campaign, I think it's very close to breaking even already. I think this should be satisfying for Warner Brothers. I would feel very good about moving forward with this franchise because there are big changes coming down the line, as they've made very clear. New characters, new leads, say goodbye to these people. And I would say on that note that I hope that J.K. Rowling, while she's certainly basking in her success, is taking some notes from people's reactions to the film. I think that while it was very, very strong with the core fan base, I'm not quite sure how strong it was with muggles and no-mages, right? So I think that work could be done to make it a little bit stronger in the business sector. But let's get to what's really exciting this weekend, and that's Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange, it's been out for 5 weeks globally, and it's up to 616 million worldwide. That's amazing. It's closing in on some very big heavy hitters for the MCU. But what's really interesting to me is that it's about 100 million behind Winter Soldier. That's amazing. How high can Doctor Strange levitate, right? This is a very good sign for experimentation, not only cinematically within the MCU because of the really cool visuals that they had in the film, but also for new characters and the type of characters. Benedict Cumberbatch is an older leading man. He's not the beefcake that Chris Evans is. Tilda Swinton, very strong female character. Chiwetel Ejiofor, Mads Mikkelsen. It's not a beefcake parade. So this is, there's really actually, I think, Benedict Cumberbatch, he's got his Cumberbitches, right? But I don't think there's any I'm saying not a Tom Hiddleston, there's no swooniness going on here. It's just a really solid cast. And this kind of reward, I think, speaks very promisingly for not only Black Panther and Captain Marvel, but further pushing the edge of the envelope in the MCU. So Kevin Feige, and I'm sure anyone who works for him and could potentially work for him, is very pleased. Then with Allied came in number 4. Everybody's making this a referendum on Brad Pitt's star power after his divorce with Angelina Jolie. She really smeared him in the tabloids, saying he abused their kids. He had to be investigated by the FBI. Of course, he was let off the hook. There's some ugly divorces going on in Hollywood these days. And so people are wondering whether or not Brad Pitt's taken a hit professionally. And he couldn't do a lot of publicity for the film because while they say you're not allowed to ask any other questions, they're like, you can only ask questions about the movie. A lot of people don't listen, particularly, Entertainment Tonight, Access Hollywood, because, they just want to get the viewership, and they're not really known for being, industry trades, right? They're television tabloids. So Brad Pitt didn't want to answer any questions about his divorce, so he couldn't really do any interviews or, late night TV spots. I think he did work hard to promote the film. He did go to China. I think, but I think here's what the real problem is. First of all, I don't think Paramount did a very good job advertising the movie. You didn't see a lot for it, and you didn't see any advertisements until the last minute. Was Allied really on anyone's radar? No. Then, Brad Pitt, let's be honest. Brad Pitt worked so hard to get rid of his pretty boy image. He can't go back to it, right? This isn't who Brad Pitt is anymore. He's not in a big glossy romance. I also felt that the glossy picture, the clarity didn't really benefit Brad Pitt, who is infamous for having a skin problem. And also, he's an older actor now, and I think people like him more like in World War Z action movies, quirky roles. He's a very good comedian. And also, he's a very well-known producer these days for 12 Years a Slave. So I think that Brad Pitt, he got his wish. He can't go back to being the heartthrob that he once was for Legends of the Fall, where when they put gauze over the camera. So he looked a little better. But anyway, not only is that a problem, but Marion Cotillard has never really been particularly popular with U.S. moviegoers. And also, I think this speaks volumes about how far Robert Zemeckis has fallen in terms of his name recognition. He once was no one can take away Back to the Future from this guy, and Castaway, and Forrest Gump, and all the fabulous films that he's made. But he hasn't made a fabulous film, although I did like The Walk. I did like it, but it didn't do particularly well. And Robert Zemeckis and, Flight, he's making some interesting movies, but perhaps he might want to make one that's a little bit more successful because I don't know how much longer he can go on like this. Some people are saying Allied might have legs. Apparently it has awards buzz. That's news to me. I don't see any buzz anywhere, but apparently maybe people are talking about it within industry circles. I guess they're going to screenings even though they're not going to see it in the theater. I think that Brad Pitt doesn't have to worry though. He still has World War Z 2. Ideally, if it ever gets made. Last we heard, David Fincher might direct it, but I think that if he can just make that movie, he'll be in pretty good shape. Then, though, Paramount's really good news was for Arrival, which only dropped 7%. That is amazing. That is just like, wow. That is just like, it's like a Hollywood angel got its wings. That's such an amazing number to see in the top 10. For a mainstream film, no less. I mean, this is not only good news for Paramount, but it's great news for Amy Adams. Suddenly she has some box office potential. Denis Villeneuve, he's in such a good spot. If I were the Blade Runner 2 team, 2049, I'd be like, I'm so happy we chose this guy. And then who else this is going to probably work out really nicely for? The screenwriter, Eric Heiserer. I'm seeing a lot of stories about him. I think obviously Paramount feels that maybe some award nominations for screenplay, best screenplay, are a good bet, and so they're starting to push him already. And he's had a great year because he also wrote Lights Out, which was a huge financial and critical. I wouldn't say it's a huge critical hit, but it's well regarded. It's James Wan produced. So I think a big name to come out of this movie could end up being Eric Heiserer as another new top screenwriter. And we all know that screenwriters, if they play their cards right, can parlay their success into a directing gig eventually. So I hope Eric Heiserer is ready. Arrival's numbers aren't too sexy. It had a $47 million budget, 62 domestic, 93 worldwide. It's close to breaking even, although not including advertising. But what's going to really make it attractive and what's going to make it's going to solidify it as a successful film is if it gets those nominations. So you can see the wheels at Paramount's awards office already churning, and that they feel screenplay is a really good bet for them. Now let's take a look at the overall top 10. Trolls is starting to run out of steam, or glitter. They're at 291 worldwide. Not an amazing number, but I think the merchandise is going to be big on this. Whenever I've been going out the last couple of weeks, when I go to the supermarket, when I go to the toy store, when I go to Hallmark, anywhere, I see Trolls stuff. There's Trolls macaroni and cheese. There's Trolls stickers. Their ability to get this into stores and merchandising deals is impressive. So that could be where a lot of the revenue comes for that film. Bad Santa 2, man, I hope that Billy Bob Thornton Amazon show is doing well because his comeback has not materialized. He was so good in the first season of Fargo on FX, but word on the street is that Billy Bob Thornton is not fun to deal with. So I think that the industry is just against him, and that's why you haven't seen a big push media-wise for him. You don't see a lot of interviews. You just don't see a lot of, he doesn't get a lot of, visuals. He's not really out there. He doesn't have a presence, and that's on him and his team, and he should go do a big apology tour because that's really holding him back at this point. Then also Hacksaw Ridge, 18% hold. Let's see, what week is that? Week 4, that's very nice. Again, not amazing, but just like Arrival, if it can get some nominations, it'll really be in a good space. Then outside of the top 10, let's talk about Rules Don't Apply. I liked this movie quite a bit. I think it's a great little HBO movie. I agree, not really worthy of being seen in the theater. You know, it's not worth that expense and time. It reminds me a little bit of 2013's The Last of Robin Hood, which was also a very good movie about the reality of working in Hollywood. But here's the thing, we've talked about this before. Audiences have set a pattern up, again, follow the formula, that audiences don't like behind-the-scenes stories about Hollywood. They're just not interested in them. There is an audience for it, but it's not big enough to sustain a theatrical release, particularly when they're depressing stories, right? Not like, I became a rich and famous movie star. Instead, it's like, Hollywood beat me, or it's not all it seems, right? And then people are like, I don't like that at all. I don't want to watch it. I did think that Rules Don't Apply was extremely realistic, and I thought it was really good at depicting the black holes that people can get, like the black holes that people can get sucked into when they go to Hollywood, of a former star or someone who isn't the height of their stardom anymore, but has enough star power to kind of last forever, right? So it's like a little bit like, oh, well, Howard Hughes is kind of a jerk and my career isn't going anywhere, but if I leave, that I won't be associated with Howard Hughes anymore. At least it's a name, right? That's kind of the Hollywood game a little bit. How does it look on paper? Can you get someone's attention? At least you have a name. And that works for a behind-the-scenes career sometimes as well. So I thought it was I really actually liked it quite a bit, but again, I wouldn't recommend paying a theatrical, price to go and see it. Maybe a matinee if you really want to see it on the big screen. I think this also speaks to Warren Beatty being totally passed over. Talk about Warren Beatty, again, a name. He was enough of a name to get some traction for this and to get an amazing cast of a cavalcade of some stars that used to be a bigger cavalcade of stars. But he's not big enough to sell tickets. He just isn't. Also, audiences today, I don't know if this has always been the case or if it's just something that's emerged, but people today, don't really know a lot about past talent. Like, on a side note, over the Thanksgiving holiday, my family and I went to a steakhouse, and there was a band there taking, requests, and my dad and my sister thought that Frank Sinatra would be a great steakhouse request, my way. And the band didn't know the song. They had to look it up on their iPads, and we're like, who doesn't know Sinatra? Particularly one of, actually his most famous song. And you're musicians by trade. I didn't just stop someone on the street randomly and ask them. It was pretty shocking. So people don't know who Warren Beatty is. Also, Lily Collins, she's been killing movies since Mirror, Mirror and Mortal Instruments. But what this is particularly troublesome for is Alden Ehrenreich. Maybe that Disney can say, oh, well, he's not Han Solo yet. Don't worry about it. But I think it's a little bit troubling. Then also Moonlight had its first drop. It dropped 18%. So the chances of it getting into the top 10 have passed. Still, very strong performer. I think it would have been nice to get into the top 10, get another headline out of it, but hopefully A24's awards campaign team is working very hard to make sure it gets those nominations. Loving, though, now is jockeying to get into the top 10. They added 284 theaters. They're at number 11 this weekend. Manchester by the Sea would also love to get into the top 10. We'll see if any of those can achieve what Moonlight unfortunately could not. Then Lion and Miss Sloane both opened in limited release, 4 and 3 theaters, respectively. Their per theater averages, not particularly impressive, not what they need to really get voters excited about them. They'd have to, these people would have to come up with something else to excite the voters. Harvey Weinstein, though, he has a factory too, but I think he needs to, re-energize his product a little bit. It's just too obvious at this point. And then for EuropaCorps, Luc Besson still trying to get into the U.S. market. So far, not so good. Valerian, so much is riding on you. Then I have 2 really interesting stories that I really wanted to put in here about the overseas box office. Your Name is now the 3rd highest grossing Japanese film of all time. Now, the numbers I'm going to tell you are what the film's made globally. So Spirited Away is still the highest grossing Japanese film of all time. It's Miyazaki here, 300 million. And then the second is also Miyazaki's Howl's Moving Castle with 235. And then here comes Your Name with 196. That's amazing. Funimation has an English dub in the works, and they have a qualifying release in Los Angeles this coming weekend, so that it can, do well, hopefully at the Oscars and the Golden Globes. It did pretty well at the Annie Awards, but in terms of getting nominations, but it wasn't on fire either. Then Germany, here's an interesting story. The #1 German language movie of the year is Welcome to the Hartmans. And this is a refugee crisis comedy. You know, I think a lot of people feel there's nothing to laugh about with that situation in Germany, but apparently some do, as the film is doing quite well. Well, for German language films. It's about an African refugee that becomes part of a German family, and that refugee is played by Belgian actor Eric Kabongo. And then it has some German stars in it. It has, very respected actress Senta Berger, and then 2 box office stars in Germany, Elias Mbarek. So apparently there is some diversity in Germany already. And also Florian David Fitz as the father to Senta Berger's mother of that family. It's made $20.3 million so far, but interestingly, it is the only German film to crack the top 10 locally the entire year, whereas the rest of the time it's been Hollywood fare only. So good for Germany for getting on the board. It reminds me actually a little bit of The Untouchables. A lot of you guys speak about why do we have to have diversity, but when you see these foreign films, often when they do well, it's when they finally embrace diversity. The Untouchables was like the first film to have like a major lead actor of color in France. So pretty big deal. So that's the weekend box office. As for this coming weekend, we've only got Incarnate from High Top releasing. This is traditionally a very slow weekend because they want to give these Thanksgiving, they invested so much in these Thanksgiving movies. They want to give a little bit of space for audiences to enjoy, or force them to eat, in this case, leftovers. Although Jackie will be opening in limited release, and of course, Natalie Portman is supposed to be a frontrunner for at least a nomination this year. So I'm curious, for this first weekend of December, post-Thanksgiving, what do you plan to see? Are you going to enjoy some leftovers? Are you going to abstain and watch something on a different size screen? Or maybe you'll be checking out Jackie in limited release. Share your thoughts and your plans down below, and you can check out some more videos right now.